Welcome to Bet Sedek, a community of justice. Welcome to Bet Sedek, a community of justice. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Sedek to everyone. As Shalom is Welcome to Bet Sedek, a community is where we would like to be at in terms of this is in Genesis 1 and 2, the world was in a state of shalom, and that's what we're striving to get back to. But in order to get back to a state of shalom, we will ultimately need what? We will ultimately need tzedek, and tzedek is justice. That's very, very important. All right, so we're in the Shabbat hours. So this is Erev Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom to all. And Shabbat lets us witness God's supremacy, the Creator's supremacy. All right, so every Shabbat we're saying, the Creator, El Elyon, you are supreme. You are supreme. All right. Now we will be talking about a suspected white supremacist pastor who said, return to European Christian colonization of African nations. This is what this suspected white supremacist pastor said. All right. And the goal of the system of white supremacy, the religion of white supremacy, is to get everyone to bow down to white supremacy and honor Sunday sacredness. That's exactly the goal of this suspected white supremacist pastor and all other suspected white supremacist pastor. All right, very clear. We're not going around the bush. I'm not your typical Negro preacher. All right, we're just really making that clear. I'm not your typical Negro preacher. We will shoot straight. And I know a lot of suspected white supremacists that say, "Oh, well, keep talking like that. We'll take you out." Well, you could take me out. I'm a dead man. You could take me out. You could take me out. I'm a dead man in the anointed one. But the truth will be the truth. And the truth without justice is a lie. All right? But you could take your little nukes, you could take your little guns and think you could take people out. But let me just be clear. If you come for me, just watch your back as well. So this is not no turn the other cheek Western Christianity we're preaching. We're preaching tzedek. All right? You come to attack, we will attack back. I'm just keeping it straight. I'm for peace, I'm for shalom, but I will defend myself. But we will preach the truth. So I'm not your typical Negro preacher that will be preaching love, love, love. But then when we need to denounce the system of white supremacy, denounce non-justice, denounce sin, and say, well, I can't say that, or I'll get fired, or they'll kill me. Well, then come kill me then. Come kill me then. Come kill me then. But the words that I speak, they still will stand. And the truth is the truth. So we'll talk about this suspected white supremacist pastor who said, return to European Christian colonization of African nations. And we'll look at that. But let's look at Genesis 9, verse 25. And I'm going to share my screen. Genesis 9, verse 25 to 29. All right. It's time that we stand up against this religion of white supremacy, because this is the antichrist religion. This is the beast of Revelation 13. The second beast is the United States of America. We need to stop being cowards. We need to stop being cowards. Just like Malcolm X said, we need to stop being like those Negro preachers who only want to preach pie in the sky and who never wants to talk about the oppression of white supremacy. So we need to address these things and not just trying to run around the bush because you're scared of getting massa offended. Well, massa could get offended because while they could attack, we have the Lord of armies. How we say, l'Éternel des armées. We have a warrior behind us. El Elyon. We have a warrior behind us. We have nothing to fear. And if we die, we die. If that's the best you could do, kill, then come kill. Come kill. Come try it. Come try, but we will defend as well. We will defend as well. Because that's what Abraham did. When Lot was trapped in colonization in Genesis chapter 14, he took his armed soldiers and went down and he took care of business. So we're not going to be doing this, oh, Negro preacher, turn the other cheek garbage. That's not what we're preaching. We're preaching tzedek. That's what we're preaching. We're preaching truth. We're preaching justice. And we have to speak against non-justice of these suspected white supremacist pastors that are all over the internet And all they're trying to do is to get you to submit to the religion of white supremacy and accept Sunday sacredness, because that will be the mark of the beast when they legislate it into law. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen. Let's get into this. And we're going to look at Genesis chapter 9, which is what the suspected white supremacists love to use to basically put us in our place. And when I say us, I mean non-white people. So let's go to Genesis chapter 9. Everyone go to Genesis chapter 9. We're gonna just look at verse 25 to 29, because that's what the suspected white supremacist was looking at. So we're gonna look at that. All right. So when you have time, you can read the whole chapter for context. But we're gonna read it from verse 25. All right. I'm reading from the CJB. He said, "Cursed be Canaan, he will be a servant of servants to his brothers." Verse 26. Then he said, and remember, this is Noah talking, Noah. It says, then he said, "Blessed be Adonai, the God of Shem. Canaan will be their servant. May God enlarge Yefet. He will live in the tents of Shem. But Canaan will be their servant." After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. In all, Noah lived 950 years. Then he died. All right. So this is what they use to preach the curse of Ham. And then basically he was talking about how, well, yeah, even though it said Canaan, but it just means, the entire lineage, everyone in Ham. And then he says, when you look at history and you see that all aspects of Ham have been subjugated. And he's basically saying it's by God's providence. And I'm paraphrasing. He's saying that it's by God's providence. And he says, yes, it may there may be some things that's circumstantial, but it's largely by God's providence, as if God ordained it to be like this. And so we're going to look at this. Now I'm going to play where you could listen. Let me pull it up so you could actually listen. So this is white supremacist Dale, and you could hear this in the Kingsway Reformed Church. And let me just play it for you so you could listen. And just pay close attention.
Of people, the African peoples
church, and let me just play it for you so you could listen. And just pay close attention.
Of people, the African peoples
church, and let me just play it for you so you could listen.
Were to get the gospel last. Now, the Shemites had it first, the Japhethites had it next, and the Japhethites took it across the world. And who brought it to Africa? The Europeans, the Americans. The missionary movement came out of Japheth and came out and spread the gospel across Africa.
It was a gift. I resented it for 3 weeks. Then I filled the bowl with...
Sorry about that. And so let us just pay close attention to this. And what move, mom.
Effects of paganism and all of these different things really does produce the results of this curse. And what this means is that the Hamitic peoples have not labored under equal circumstances, but unequal circumstances. Curses have real physical effects. Blessings have real physical effects. We're afraid to look at that because that talks about inferiority and superiority, and it talks about distinctions, and that to everybody in our generation, again, is just taboo. But God, in his sovereign wisdom, designed these real conditions in keeping with the prophecy of Genesis 9 that would place the African peoples historically in a state of greater dependence, in a state of greater struggle, in a state of greater need. And even with the Western efforts to solve African poverty, we sent, since 1960, trillions of dollars in foreign aid to Africa.
Now, if you're paying close attention, if we look at Acts chapter, turn with me in Acts chapter 8, and let's take a look at African poverty. Everyone, let's turn to Acts chapter 8. All right, I'm gonna read a little from Acts chapter 8 here, starting from verse. Yeah, I'm gonna start from verse 26. Acts chapter 8, verse 26. It says, an angel of Adonai said to Philip, get up and go southward on the road that goes down to Jerusalem to Azah, the desert road. 27. So he got up and went. On his way, he caught sight of an Ethiopian, a eunuch who was a minister in charge of all the treasure of Kandake, or queen of Ethiopia. So this Nubian man was a treasurer of the Kandake. Kandake means queen, like queen mother. Okay? A lot of mistranslations put Candace, and they think of it as like a name, but no, it's a title, Kandake. All right? He had been to Jerusalem to worship. So he already been to Jerusalem to worship. And now, as he was returning home, he was sitting in his chariot reading the prophet Yeshayahu. So here's a Nubian treasurer who's in a chariot. All right. So he's in a modern day car. So we see, we always like to think of, oh, Africa, poverty, poverty. We're not even looking at individual ethnic groups. We just lump it as in just one. But we're not even looking at Acts chapter 8, where this Nubian treasurer under the Kandake is going to Jerusalem to honor the Creator. All right, we're continuing. The Kandake is the queen. All right, and now it says, and now as he was returning home, he was sitting in his chariot reading the prophet Yeshayahu. So here's a Nubian that was able to read. Okay, he's reading the prophets. Verse 29, the Spirit said to Philip, not the white man, not the white man, not the white missionary. It says the Spirit said to Philip, who was not a Jew, a non-white person, go over to this chariot and stay close to it. As Philip ran up, he heard the Ethiopian, the Nubian, reading from Yeshayahu the prophet. Then he said, do you understand what you're reading? He asked. The Nubian said, how can I? He said, unless someone explains it to me. And he invited Philip to climb up and sit with him. So it's like he's saying, hey, come in my car. Come in my car and let's read it together. And remember, it's the Spirit that sent Philip to him. All right. Verse 32. Now the portion of the Tanakh that he was reading was this. He was like a sheep led to be slaughtered, like a lamb silent before the shearer. He does not open his mouth. He was humiliated and denied justice. Who will tell about his descendants, since his life has been taken from earth? And that's from Isaiah 53, verse 7 and 8. The treasurer said to Philip, here's my question to you. Is the prophet talking about himself or someone else? Then Philip started to speak, beginning with the passage. He went on to tell him the good news about Yeshua. As they were going down the road. They came to some water. And the treasurer said, "Look, here's some water. Is there any reason why I shouldn't be immersed?" He ordered the chariot to stop. Then both Philip and the treasurer went down into the water, and Philip immersed him. So he asked for his own immersion. It wasn't a white Christian nationalist evangelistic campaign. It wasn't a white Christian nationalist crusade. It wasn't white Christian missionaries that went into Africa. Remember, this is before Shaul went to do his work to the white Gentiles. Verse 39. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord snatched Philip away. The eunuch saw no more of him, and he continued on his way, full of joy. But Philip showed up at Ashdod and continued proclaiming the good news as he went through all the towns until he came to Caesarea. So here in that story, we see how he already went to Jerusalem to honor El Elyon. He already had the Tanakh, reading it. He just wasn't sure in Yeshayahu. Was Yeshayahu talking about himself? Was Isaiah talking about himself? Or was he talking about someone else? And this is when the Jew named Philip, the non-white person named Philip, explained to him, but who sent him? The white man sent him? No, the Spirit sent him. And that's very important for us to keep that in mind. All right. But after this, we're going to go to Daniel chapter 7. So go to Daniel chapter 7, verse 23. All right. Because we're going to see, since he was preaching about prophecies and what God's word says about the state of Hamitic people, and he's talking about African peoples, we'll let the scripture tell us what's the state of European people. And we're going to see that in Daniel chapter 7, verse 23 to 25. So we're going to go to that next. But let's continue to listen to this Christian pastor.
And the transformation has not been great. The effects have been minimal. In other words, I don't believe that this curse can be solved with money. I do believe that money helps, but I don't believe this curse can be solved with money. So what is the real solution? That's what we want to talk about. What is the real solution for bringing gospel order to the world, including the Hamitic peoples? And here's the answer. It's by embracing both the blessings and the curses that God has declared in chapter 9 of Genesis. And here's what I mean by that. God has sovereignly assigned different stations and trajectories to different peoples for his glory. The Japhethites have been blessed to be enlarged in both territory and Christian regeneration. We see that in this passage. The Hamites.
Now, where do you see that in that passage? Christian regeneration. What is he talking about? Christian regeneration. Christianity is a religion. God did not start Christianity. Christianity is a religion that the Roman Catholic Church started, Roman or Western Christianity, and their goal was to supersede Israel. All right. And that is the origin of the religion of white supremacy. It's very important for us to keep that in mind. God did not start a religion called Christianity. Let's just make that very clear. He did not start a religion called Christianity. God did not start religion. Religions are man-made. The European or white Christian church of Rome claimed to supersede Israel, and they claimed religious supremacy as God's new chosen people. So that's how a lot of white people view themselves, or a lot of white Christians view themselves. Not all, but many, they view themselves as God's new chosen people. They are the new Israel. The church replaced Israel. White European Christians replaced Israel. And remember, we talked about in the past, before Europeans thought of themselves as white, they called themselves Christians, because Christian meant a race to them, the white race. It's when non-white people started to become Christians that they said, no, we got to draw the line. We can't call ourselves Christians now. We'll just call ourselves white, because you could change your religion, but you can't change your skin color. So it's important for us to keep that in mind. And I will continue playing.
Have been assigned to a civilizational station of subordination and dependence. And the answer to this paradigm is not endless foreign money. That's not the answer to this problem. The answer is to return to European Christian colonization of African nations. I believe that's truly the answer, and let me tell you why.
Okay, so I hope you listen to what he just said. He said, return to European Christian colonization of African nations. So that's the solution. That's the solution. Return to European Christian colonization of African nations, and we'll allow him to explain himself.
It's the only thing that has historically worked, that has shown fruit.
Wait, you don't write anything down after conversations?
I'm not talking about overtaking Africa. I'm not talking about enslaving Africans. I'm not talking about exploiting Africans.
Okay, how can you have colonization without those elements? Colonization is just a sophisticated word for slavery, for exploitation. Just like when Haiti was colonized, it was enslaved, it was exploited. Reparations were paid to France, which started from Alexandre Pétion, because he was very sympathetic to his white French father. And then you had others, you had Geoffroy, and then you had the Concordat of 1860 with the Vatican. And then in 1862, that's when the United States recognized Haiti as an independent country. So where do you have this benevolent colonization where basically what that type of colonization is basically white people ruling over you, and then they're gonna say, well, we'll help you. You're gonna have schools, you're gonna speak English and French and Portuguese. You're gonna have schools, you're gonna have Western schools, Western languages, Western hospitals, and we're gonna solve all your problems. But we're gonna extract the wealth, we're gonna extract this, we're gonna extract that, and you'll be better off. That's why you have to understand a lot of times you'll receive help from white people, or they'll help you when they get something out of it in return, when it benefits them more oftentimes. That's when they'll offer to help. So he's proposing a European Christian colonization. And notice he said return. Because a lot of time when we talk about colonization in the past and people talk about Christianity, people say, oh, well, Christianity had nothing to do with it. Well, he said return to European Christian colonization of African nations. But he's saying, well, but not the type with slavery or exploitation. And then what kind of colonization? What kind of colonization is this? You just said return. So it's important for us to understand colonization and what it really was. Because basically colonization always benefits the colonizers more. And then you who are being colonized simply receive the scraps. And then you're colonized, you're convinced to believe, well, I speak a European language now. I wear European clothes now. Or, we have Western schools now. Or we didn't have this before and that before. All right. So we'll continue. So listen carefully.
But I'm talking about establishing order, godly leadership, and carrying the gospel to their lands. In fact,
So he's equating carrying the gospel to their lands as a return to European Christian colonization of African nations, establishing order. And when he says order, he means order according to white culture, according to Western culture. Because anything outside of West culture is not order unless they approve of it. And just like when he was talking about Japan, and so if white culture, if white people approve of it, then it's good. But if they deem it as it's not orderly, then it's chaos. Why? Because white culture said so.
Only times that African nations have seen significant and sustained civilizational improvement. And I'm talking about infant mortality rates going down. I'm talking murder going down. I'm talking disease going down, tribal wars ceasing. The only time Africa has ever seen that happen in being sustained is when they have come under Japhethite supervision.
Japhethite supervision is a sophisticated way of saying white supremacy, white rule. Okay. Now, he talked about, tribal warfare. What about World War One? What about World War II? Wasn't that many Western nations? Wasn't that many white people fighting other white people? We know that there was other people involved as well. But the portrayal of showing Africans or non-white peoples as fighting or being violent. But what about white people? What about white people fighting other white people? Let us have him continue.
We saw this in colonial Kenya, Botswana, dramatically in Rhodesia. White Christians turned a broken third world territory into a thriving first world Christian nation in less than a century. You have a continent that has been struggling for literally millennia. And then you bring in a handful of European Christians, and they turn that in 100 years into a first world nation like that.
Like that. The white man comes in, you just bring a handful of white men, bam, like that. Magic, and just turn the African nations around like that. Speak English, infrastructure, this, that, clean water, no crime, like that. All right, like that. Then we should solve those problems with all the school shootings. Let's solve that like that. Let's solve that. The suicide rates, the pedophilia rates, the child pornography, the crime that involves embezzlement, stealing funds from companies, stealing in a digital sense, bribery, and all these different things. When white people commit a crime, that can't be talked about because that's being hateful. But non-white people are just animals, and just bring a few white men in there, and bam, and just quickly everything will change. Now we're in paradise. Well, let me read from here. This book right here is called Confronting White Supremacy in the American Church before we end. And this is on page 39. This is by Christopher Norris, Witnessing Whiteness, Confronting White Supremacy in the American Church. And this is a white author. He said, white supremacy was not the result of setting theology aside, but was precisely a theological and ecclesial invention. The theological origins of white supremacy lie at the point which religious difference morphed into racial difference, especially around the status of Jewishness. And we talked about that. That's why Christian was a race first and then a religion, because Christian meant white. That's important for us to keep that in mind. Very important. This chapter is called The Theological Origins of White Supremacy. And it talks about supersessionism, which is a fancy word for replacement theology. The idea that white European Christians, or as they call themselves Christians, which meant Europeans or white, basically replaced Israel, and they were the new chosen people. And especially in regards to the Church of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church. Here it says the seeds of supersessionism on page 47. The seeds of supersessionism were planted in the Christian faith at its outset, nurtured through church fathers, including Justin Martyr, and made explicit in Reformation texts like Martin Luther's, which enabled the earliest Spanish explorers to begin to conceive of the newfound peoples as racially other. Rather than recognizing Paul's caution to Gentile Christians to remember that they have been grafted into the root of Israel, quote, it is not you that support the root, but the root support you, unquote, so that you should not boast, Romans 11:17, verse 18. Christians came to believe themselves to be the first fruits, the elect. European Christianity took Israel's story as its own. That's what you call supersessionism, replacement theology. I'm gonna read from the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by this is the revised expanded edition by Neely Fuller Jr. And I'm reading on the seventh area of influence where it talks about religion. And this is what he says. Since the religion of white supremacy is the worst religion, the most powerful religion, and it is designed to help promote religious confusion and conflict among non-white people. It is best for non-white people to avoid speaking and or acting against any religion except the religion of white supremacy. As long as the religion of white supremacy, racism exists, religious conflicts are guaranteed to continue. All right. Now listen to this carefully. Be extremely careful in regards to everything that you say and do in your interaction with any white person who identifies himself or herself by a religious title, or who implies that he or she is a religious person, who is trying to help you to end white supremacy, racism, and or help you to produce justice, which means balance between people. Explanation. If a person is white and you suspect that he or she may be a white supremacist, racist, do not expect that person to tell you the truth about his or her religion. Do not expect that person to tell you that his or her religion is white supremacy. Do not expect that person to say that his or her religion is something other than white supremacy. Also, keep in mind that as long as white supremacy exists, it is incorrect to attempt to stop the practice of any religion except the religion of white supremacy. And he'll explain, the only religion of a white supremacist, racist, is the religion of white supremacy. Therefore, a white supremacist may say, pretend that he or she is a so-called member of or a participant in any religion that he or she thinks that a non-white person will regard as acceptable. A white supremacist will pretend to practice a religion other than the religion of white supremacy for the purpose of deceiving his or her victims, non-white persons, and to cause those victims to think that the white person is a so-called religious friend who is practicing some religion other than the religion of white supremacy. Remember, the basic strategy of a skilled white supremacist includes deception, which is indirect violence. All right? So, and I'm going to read this one last quote. During the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, it is not necessary for white people to offer to help non-white people to end white supremacy. All that is necessary for white people to do in order to end white supremacy is to stop practicing white supremacy themselves and to stop or persuade all other white people to do the same. Can you check that noise, please? So that's very important for us to understand that. That's on page 266. That's on page 266. So we have to understand these matters. Now, this pastor, this suspected white supremacist, this suspected racist that was talking, what God, what deity does he serve? What deity does he serve? Let's read page 4 or 5 of the same book. The religion of white supremacy, racism, is the greatest, strongest, and most efficient religion ever established among the people of the known universe. And the gods of that religion are the white supremacists themselves. So that gives you an idea. That gives you an idea to the gods of the religion of white supremacy. All right. And now you might say, well, why did I say suspected white supremacists? During the existence of white supremacy racism, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, any white person who is able to think, speak, and act to end white supremacy, and who does not do so, should be regarded as a racist suspect or a suspected white supremacist. So he said, return to European Christian colonization of African nations. And you have a lot of white Christian nationalists who are simply emboldened. And basically, what they want to do is have the entire world to bow down to the religion of white supremacy. And you do that by keeping Sunday holy, by keeping Sunday sacred, because Sunday worship is racist. Sunday worship, Sunday sacredness is racist. It's white supremacist. It was founded by racism, it's maintained by racism, and the climax and end of it will be racism. Because Sunday sacredness started due to racism against the Jews. They were racist against the Jews. And Ignatius of Antioch, Justin Martyr. You had Constantine who put it into law. You had Pope Victor. You had many other people in Rome and around the Roman Empire who wanted to distinguish themselves against the Jews. The Jews were the racially other. They were the N-words, the original N-words. They were the inferior people. They were the original others. They were the inferior people. And that's how they developed the concept of race. And then the Europeans thought of themselves as Christian. We're Europeans. We are the root. We are the new Israel. And that's why when they left Europe and they came to Turtle Island, which they called New England, they killed off many of the indigenous peoples. Why? Because they thought of themselves as the new Israel and as the indigenous people in Turtle Island as who? As Canaanites. It's the same white supremacist theology. And when they came to the New World, what did they establish? Sunday sacredness. Sunday sacredness was started largely in part to distinguish Europeans from the Israel of God. They wanted to make a clear distinction, night and day distinction. That's why they said, no, we're not going to do this Passover. We're not going to do Shabbat. And then there was a slow drift. And then they say, you know what? We'll have Easter on a Sunday. And then eventually, gradually through the years, through the centuries, they say, okay, well, let's have Easter every Sunday. So it was largely because of racism against the Jews. Again, they were against the Jewish identity because they saw their white Christian European identity as supreme, as superior. And they saw the Israel identity, the identity of Israel, the Jews and the people who identified as Israel, as lesser. They were the others. And also, you had Romans who worshiped the sun. That was the secondary reason. And there was other factors as well, but those are the two core reasons. Racism against the Jews, very anti-Jewish sentiments in terms of culture, in terms of identity, because they uplifted white Christian identity, and the Jews were the racial others due to supersessionism, replacement theology. This is why Sunday worship was started in blood. It was started in racism. And then the Europeans saw that it worked so well, and they took that same racism and they used it against other non-white people, indigenous peoples, Africans, Asians, and they just took it all around the world. Then you had the doctrine of discovery with papal bulls, Dum Diversas, Inter Caetera, Romanus Pontifex. And then you had Sunday lynchings. And then many non-white people received or learned about Sunday worship on the plantation, on the cotton fields, on the sugar cane fields. So Sunday worship was started by racism, maintained through racism and lynching, and it will culminate and end through the mark of the beast when they make Sunday worship mandatory and legislated by law, even for the atheist. even for the atheist. That's why you can get the mark of the beast on your forehead, which means you believe it, you've been deceived to believe it, or you can get it on your hand, which means you don't believe it, but you just want to get it to keep your business, to keep your W-2, to keep your food stamps, to keep your government benefits, to keep your home, to keep you buying and selling. You're just getting it through compliance. So we'll end it here. You have been a part of Bet Sedek, a community of justice. Bet Sedek, a community of justice. We need to be rooted in Yeshua, the anointed one of Yisrael. The anointed one of Yisrael. But there's one verse that we have to read, which is Daniel 7:25, and that's what we talked about when we talk about what does Bible prophecy say about the religion of white supremacy. Because he talked about Genesis, and he's basically saying that the providence of God makes African people to be perpetual slaves in servitude, and we need to be under white rule. All right. Well, let's see what Daniel 7, verse 23 to 25 says. It says, this is what he says: the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on earth. It will be different from the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth, trample it down, and crush it. That's precisely the religion of white supremacy, the Roman system of white supremacy. As for the 10 horns, out of the kingdoms, 10 kings will arise, and yet another will arise after them. That's the little horn. Now he will be different from the earlier ones, and he will put down 3 kings. Verse 25. Let's see what this papal system of white supremacy will seek to do. He will speak words against the supreme and try to exhaust the holy ones of the supreme. All right. He will attempt to change the times and the laws. So here scripture is telling us that this Roman power, the fourth beast, right? The Roman papacy, the Roman system of white supremacy, the papal system of white supremacy would speak words against the supreme God, El Elyon, and seek to change his times and laws, which is the fourth commandment. The fourth commandment. And if you go to Psalm 92, and it says, it's a good thing to give thanks unto the name of the Eternal One, and his name is El Elyon. And we know that the sign of God's supremacy is Shabbat. And that's why the system of white supremacy changed it from Shabbat, or tried to change it from Shabbat to Sunday. Because by doing that, they're saying, us white people, we are supreme. But the creator is supreme. El Elyon is supreme. Hashem is supreme. And that's why by observing Shabbat, we are recognizing his supremacy. But white people are so offended that they want you to bow down to Sunday sacredness, Sunday worship. Because when you do that, you say that white supremacy is supreme. You saying that I recognize white supremacy. And that's the mark of the beast. It's bowing down to the system, to the religion of white supremacy, by accepting Sunday sacredness through the legislation of law. It will be a federal law that will start in the United States of America, then it'll go all around the world. So God will allow white supremacy to run rampant, because he'll allow you. But when Yeshua, the anointed one of Yisrael, returns, he will crush and destroy the system of white supremacy. He will destroy it. Come out of white supremacy. Come out of this white supremacist theology. Come out of Sunday worship and accept God's Shabbat. Accept God's Tzedek, his justice. Because that's what Shabbat is. It's a memorial of creation. It's a sign of liberation, Deuteronomy 5:15. And it's a sign of God's Tzedek, justice, Isaiah 56, Isaiah 58. And the 3 angels' messages of Revelations 14:6 through 12 talks about God's justice. It's called justice by trust. Yeshua is our justice. And this is why when Avram fought the colonizers of Genesis 14 and rescued Lot, who came up to him? My king is justice. In Hebrew, he's called Malchit Tzedek. Came up to him, gave him the bread and the wine, and gave him 1/10 of the things that he had. Why? Because he fought against the non-justice that was done against Lot and the others when they colonized, when those four kings that were more powerful colonized the five weaker kingdoms. All of this white Christian nationalism will lead directly to to the mark of the beast. That's exactly where it's leading to. They're so emboldened now. That's why we need to stand for justice. Some of us will die. It's a reality. Some of us will die. Will you stand up to die? When Yeshua says, pick up your noose, pick up your noose, pick up your cross. We need to stop with this. We need to stop with this weak white supremacist Christianity that says, well, hey, there's nothing we could do. No, some of us will die. When Yeshua says the reign of God is at hand, that was revolutionary during that time, because Caesar was considered the Son of God. He was considered the Lord. He was considered the Savior. He was considered in charge of the kingdom, the reign. But here we are following Yeshua, the anointed one of Israel, and we just so weak. So fearful. Oh, they'll take us out. They'll destroy our family. Then okay, then so be it. But we're gonna preach about the three Hebrew young men, right? Who walked in the fire, but we don't want to walk in the fire. We don't want to walk in the fire today. Oh, well, Daniel was in the lion den, but we don't want to be thrown in the lion's den. If we're thrown in the fire or in the lion's den, so be it. If he liberates us, he liberates us. If we die, we die. But we're going to stand up for justice. We're going to stand up for Yeshua, the King of justice. He is the just one. Because in Psalm 1, there are two groups, the just and the unjust. Who will you stand for? Will you stand for white supremacy? Or will you stand for the created supremacy? You make your choice. Shabbat or Sunday. You make your choice. Subscribe for more, and subscribe to our sister page, which is called Shabbat Justice.